The morning began like countless others in Captain Sarah's career. She arrived at the airport before sunrise, the world outside still wrapped in shadows and silence. The terminal buzzed with travelers clutching coffee cups and boarding passes, but Sarah's steps remained steady and unhurried. Years in the cockpit had given her a rhythm, a discipline that never wavered. Her uniform was crisp, her tie perfectly aligned, her hair tied back neatly beneath her cap. To the casual observer, she was simply another pilot reporting for duty. But among her colleagues, Sarah carried a reputation that preceded her, a reputation for being calm under pressure, decisive when others hesitated, and deeply committed to every life entrusted to her plane. As she approached the jet, the early light revealed its sleek body waiting on the tarmac. The aircraft stood tall and unshaken, a vessel of steel and trust that would carry nearly 200 souls across the country. Sarah's hand brushed the cool metal near the door as she boarded, a quiet ritual she always performed before every flight. She believed in respecting the machine, and in turn, it had always respected her. Inside the cockpit, she slid into her seat, greeted by the familiar glow of instruments and switches. Her co-pilot, a younger officer named Mason Reed, was already running through checklists. He was capable, diligent, but still carried the nerves of someone who hadn't yet faced the true tests of aviation. Sarah offered him a reassuring smile. "Morning, Mason," she said, her tone firm but warm. "Morning, Captain. Systems look good so far," he replied, flipping a few final switches. Together, they moved through the pre-flight checks, their voices steady, professional, precise. Each response echoed the trust built into aviation, a trust that hundreds of passengers silently placed in them without ever seeing their faces. Meanwhile, in the cabin, the passengers trickled in. A mother guiding two sleepy children with stuffed animals, a businessman already on a phone call, a college student clutching headphones, and an elderly couple leaning on each other's arms. Each boarded with their own expectations, some eager for their destinations, others dreading the hours of sitting. None of them imagined that this flight would etch itself into their memory forever. As boarding completed, Sarah picked up the intercom. Her voice, smooth and reassuring, filled the cabin. "Good morning, ladies, and this is Captain, and I'd like to welcome you aboard. We're expecting clear skies for most of the flight and a smooth ride. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you at your destination right on time." The words rolled easily off her tongue, but as she set the intercom aside, Sarah felt a fleeting ripple in her chest. She had learned to listen to those instincts, the subtle sense that something might not be as ordinary as it seemed. Over the years, she had faced thunderstorms, engine failures, and emergency landings. Each had left its mark, sharpening her intuition like a blade. The engines roared to life, a low thunder that vibrated through the cabin walls. The aircraft taxied forward, joining a line of other planes waiting to take flight. From the cockpit, Sarah's eyes swept across the runway, the horizon slowly glowing as dawn broke open the sky. For a brief moment, the world looked peaceful, predictable. "Ready?" Mason asked, his hand hovering over the throttle. "Let's take them up," Sarah replied. The plane surged forward, gathering speed, its wheels clinging to the asphalt until the earth finally let go. The cabin tilted as the aircraft climbed, engines steady and strong. Passengers settled in, some closing their eyes, others staring out at the shrinking city below. Sarah guided the ascent with the practiced ease of someone born to command the skis. At 30,000 feet, the world seemed serene. Clouds stretched like endless seas beneath them, the sun scattering gold across the horizon. It looked like the perfect flight. But Sarah couldn't shake the faint whisper of unease at the back of her mind. Pilots often joked about the sixth sense, the unexplainable awareness that danger sometimes gave before it struck. Sarah had felt it before, and it had always been right. She shifted slightly in her seat, eyes scanning the panel again. Nothing seemed wrong. Everything was functioning. And yet, she knew better than to ignore that quiet inner voice. She took a slow breath, her fingers tapping lightly on the yoke. To the passengers, this was just another ordinary morning in the sky. But to Sarah, captain and veteran aviator, it felt like the calm before a storm. And soon the storm would arrive. The aircraft leveled smoothly at 30,000 feet, and for a time everything seemed perfect. Passengers unbuckled, attendants rolled carts down the aisles, and soft chatter filled the cabin. From the cockpit, Captain Sarah kept her gaze steady on the instrument panel, her hands resting with practiced calm on the controls. Mason, her co-pilot, leaned back slightly, his nervous energy settling as the plane hummed in flawless rhythm. But then, like an unwelcome whisper, a faint amber light flickered on the console. Sarah's eyes snapped to it. Hydraulic pressure. The needle dipped lower than it should. At first, it seemed like a small fluctuation, nothing unusual for long flights. But within seconds, a second light blinked. Then another. Hydraulics 1 and 2 showing irregular pressure, Mason said, his voice tightening. I see it, Sarah replied, her tone flat but calm. Hydraulics were no small issue. They controlled the steering, the brakes, the flaps, the lifeblood of maneuverability. Without them, the aircraft could turn into little more than a metal coffin drifting through the sky. Sarah's hand hovered over the panel, her mind racing, calculating. She checked the backup system, praying it would hold. Outside the cockpit, turbulence rattled the plane. Drinks spilled, a child squealed, and passengers exchanged nervous glances. Sarah knew what turbulence meant in this case. The jet was struggling to hold balance as its systems fought to adjust. Cabin pressure dropping, Mason reported. The alarm blared. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling with a mechanical snap, dangling like pale yellow lifelines. Gasps and cries erupted in the cabin as passengers scrambled to fit them over their faces. Flight attendants moved swiftly, but the panic was spreading like fire. Sarah seized the intercom. Her voice poured through the speakers with a steadiness she didn't entirely feel. Ladies, and this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a technical issue, but everything is under control. Please remain calm, secure your masks, and follow the instructions of our crew. Her words steadied the chaos just enough. She knew the truth, though things were spiraling faster than her crew or passengers could see. Back in the cockpit, Mason's hands shook slightly as he scrolled through emergency protocols. Nearest airport is 200 miles east. We can divert. Sarah shook her head. Not if the hydraulics keep bleeding. We might not even make half that distance. Her instincts roared louder than the alarms. Every pilot had faced tense moments, but this was different. This wasn't turbulence, wasn't a minor malfunction. This was a critical failure with no easy exit. She felt her pulse quicken, but her hands stayed firm on the yoke. Run diagnostics on auxiliary systems, she ordered. Mason obeyed, sweat dotting his forehead. The numbers didn't look good. Auxiliaries are compensating, but only partially, if we lose them. We won't lose them, Sarah cut in sharply, though the steel in her tone was mostly for Mason's sake. Deep inside, she feared exactly that. She glanced through the cockpit window. The endless sky looked deceptively calm, like nothing was wrong. But Sarah knew better. Every second brought them closer to disaster. In the cabin, a teenage girl clutched her little brother, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. A businessman gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. An elderly woman prayed softly under her breath, rosary beads clinking between trembling fingers. Sarah's voice came again, softer this time, as she spoke directly to Mason. Remember your training. We keep control no matter what. Mason nodded, swallowing hard. As the plane shook again, alarms flashing like angry red eyes across the cockpit, Sarah knew the moment of decision was coming. A routine flight had just turned into a battle for survival, and the passengers behind her, mothers, children, strangers, were looking to her as their only hope. She tightened her grip, steadied her breathing, and prepared for what she already suspected. This wasn't a problem she could hand back to ground control. The responsibility was hers and hers alone. The plane, once a picture of smooth order, had turned into a fragile balance teetering on the edge of chaos. Sarah didn't know yet how she would bring them all down alive, but she did know one thing with absolute certainty: failure was not an option. And as the hydraulics groaned in protest, she braced for the choice that would define everything. Ground control's voice crackled through the radio, sharp and urgent. Flight 287, divert immediately to Carson Regional. Runways clear, emergency teams are standing by. Repeat, divert to Carson. Sarah's eyes flicked to the map glowing on her navigation display. Carson was over 200 miles away. Under normal conditions, it would have been an easy call. But these weren't normal conditions. With two hydraulic systems failing and a third only partially compensating, the aircraft's controls were slowly slipping away. "We won't make it," she muttered under her breath, almost to herself. Mason leaned forward. "Carson's our best option, ground says." "Ground doesn't see what we're seeing," Sarah cut him off, her voice firm. Her years of flying combat drills in the Air Force taught her one thing: when you're in the air, you trust the pilot's eyes, not the desk's numbers. She tapped the fuel gauge. "At this descent rate, we'll be lucky to limp 50 miles, not 200. Carson is a fantasy." Mason hesitated, his training pulling him toward protocol, toward obedience. He had never been in a cockpit where the rules didn't apply. Sarah, on the other hand, had lived those moments. War zones, simulated emergencies, near misses. Her gut had saved her before, and she knew it was the only compass worth following now. "Then what do we do?" Mason asked, his voice low, almost fearful. Sarah zoomed out on the navigation chart, her fingers tracing a path across the glowing screen. Just south of their current position lay a stretch of restricted airspace, Falcon Military Base. She knew the place well, a compact strip, shorter than ideal but engineered for fighter jets and emergency landings. It was within reach, barely. But to enter restricted airspace unannounced, it was practically inviting an armed response. Her jaw clenched as she pictured the possible outcomes. On one hand, try for Carson, risk losing all control midair and crash with hundreds of lives lost. On the other, violate airspace, risk interception by fighters, but at least aim for a runway they could realistically reach. Mason followed her gaze on the map, realization dawning. His eyes widened. "Falcon, you can't be serious. They'll scramble jets on us the second we breach that zone." "They'll scramble jets no matter where we crash if we fall short," Sarah countered. "At least this way, we put down on solid ground." The cockpit filled with the steady shriek of alarms, each one screaming for attention. Sarah blocked them out, focusing on what mattered: numbers, distances, angles, options. She was running out of all of them. "Captain, this isn't regulation," Mason pressed, his voice trembling now. Sarah turned to him, her eyes like steel. "Regulation doesn't save lives, decisions do." For a long second the cockpit held nothing but silence, Mason staring, Sarah unflinching. Finally, Mason exhaled shakily and gave a single nod. "Your call, Captain." Sarah took the radio. "Control, this is Flight 287. Carson is out of reach. Repeat, Carson is out of reach. We are diverting southbound." "Negative 287, the ground controller barked. "You are cleared for Carson. Stay on heading." Sarah's fingers tightened around the radio. Every instinct told her the clock was running out. If she wasted time arguing, lives would be lost. She released the button. For the first time in her career, she ignored ground control. The plane banked southward, passengers jolting in their seats as the aircraft turned. In the cabin, confusion rippled. People whispered, wondering why they weren't descending toward the city lights in the east. In the cockpit, Mason stared straight ahead, pale and tense. "We'll be in Falcon's airspace in 10 minutes." Sarah nodded. "Then let's hope they're listening when we get there." She didn't add what they both knew. If Falcon wasn't listening, their own military might treat them not as victims, but as threats. Still, Sarah's decision was made. Better to risk fighters in the sky than flames in a field. Better to gamble with military protocol than gamble with lives. Her course was set, her resolve unshakable. It was a choice that would not only decide the fate of her passengers, but also echo across headlines, across military halls, and into history books. The cabin was unraveling. Children cried behind their oxygen masks, mothers struggled to comfort them, and frightened voices rose in desperate questions. A businessman demanded answers from a flight attendant, his voice sharp with panic. Somewhere near the back, a baby wailed in piercing bursts that cut through the din. Fear had taken hold, and fear was contagious. Sarah knew that panic was deadlier than any mechanical failure. A panicked passenger could spark chaos, people standing when they should be seated, fighting crew for control, or making mistakes that spread terror faster than fire. She had seen what panic could do. She would not allow it on her aircraft. She pressed the intercom again, her voice firm and steady, every syllable deliberate. "Ladies, and this is Captain, I know you're frightened. I need you to hear me clearly. We are in control of this situation. Follow instructions, remain in your seats, and keep your masks secure. You are safe." The word safe mattered. Even if it wasn't entirely true, passengers clung to it like a lifeline. Her voice carried authority, the kind that could convince even the most skeptical to believe. Slowly, the volume of panic dulled, replaced by heavy silence punctuated only by muffled sobs. Mason glanced at her, almost in awe. "How do you stay that calm?" he whispered. Sarah didn't answer. Calm wasn't something she felt, it was something she decided. Panic could flood her veins later. For now, her crew and passengers needed a leader who acted as though the outcome was already decided in their favor. She toggled to the crew's intercom. "Cabin crew, listen to me carefully. Keep everyone seated, keep masks on, and walk the aisle slowly. Make eye contact. Speak firmly but gently. People believe us when we look like we believe ourselves." "Yes, Captain," came the reply, shaky but resolute. Sarah turned back to the controls. The plane shuddered again, metal groaning against the strain. She steadied her grip, coaxing the aircraft back into alignment. Her hands moved as if sculpting the air itself, easing the crippled jet through invisible currents. Every vibration told her a story of systems breaking down, of wings straining, of a body fighting to stay alive. In the cabin, a teenage girl looked up as a flight attendant knelt beside her. The attendant repeated Sarah's words. "The captain has this under control." For the girl, those words planted a seed of hope, fragile but real. Sarah could feel the weight of every soul behind her seat. 200 people she had never met, each with families, dreams, futures waiting below. She made herself a silent promise, the same one she always carried. Not one life lost, not on my watch. She thought briefly of her father, also a pilot, who once told her that a true captain's job was not to fly a plane but to carry people's trust. "Airplanes can break," he had said. "Trust can't." The memory steadied her now. Mason read numbers off the console, his voice clipped, controlled. Pressure continuing to drop, speed holding, altitude steady. "Good," Sarah replied. "As long as we have stability, we're still flying. Let's keep it that way." For nearly 20 minutes, she managed the impossible, balancing a crippled machine, commanding a frightened crew, and holding together the fragile hope of 200 strangers. Every second demanded focus. Every decision balanced on a knife's edge. Then through the windshield, a sliver of land came into view, the first edge of the restricted airspace. She knew what it meant. They were entering territory where mistakes weren't tolerated. Soon, military radar would catch them. Soon, the sky would no longer belong solely to her. But she refused to waver. "Prepare for descent," she told Mason. His eyes flickered with doubt, but he nodded. "Falcon Base." Falcon Base, she confirmed. Her voice was calm, her movements were precise, her will was unbreakable. To the frightened passengers, Sarah was not just a pilot. She was their anchor in the storm, their guardian above the clouds, the one human being standing between them and disaster. And she would not let go. The world below shifted as the aircraft dipped toward restricted skies. Falcon Military Base wasn't marked on civilian flight maps, but Sarah knew exactly where it was, and she knew what crossing its borders meant. Approaching Falcon airspace, Mason reported, his voice taut. Sarah nodded. Maintain heading, don't deviate. The cabin was calmer now, though a quiet tension hummed through the rows of passengers. They could sense the shift. The plane no longer moved like a vessel on a smooth journey. It strained, fought, groaned. And Sarah's eyes, fixed on the horizon, carried the gravity of someone flying into uncharted territory. Inside Falcon's control tower, radar operators stared at their screens in disbelief. A commercial jet was barreling straight toward them, unannounced, silent on secure channels. One operator snatched a phone. Unidentified aircraft breaching perimeter. Scramble interceptors. Within minutes, 2 F-22 Raptors roared to life, their engines shattering the stillness of the base. Ground crews sprinted clear as the sleek fighters shot into the morning sky like arrows released from a bow. They weren't escort planes. They were weapons, designed for speed, precision, and deadly force if necessary. Back in the civilian jet, Mason's face had paled. He glanced at Sarah. They'll be on us any second. They might think we're hijacked. They will think we're hijacked, Sarah corrected, her voice level. But if we hold steady, we might buy ourselves a chance. The first Raptor appeared like a ghost, materializing against the sunlight, a gray streak cutting through the clouds. Then another slid into formation on the opposite wing, their presence unmistakable, their authority absolute. Passengers gasped, pressing faces against windows. Some pointed, others whispered in terrified awe. To them, the sight of military jets at such close range felt like a scene pulled straight from a movie. But Sarah knew it was no movie. It was real, and the danger was sharper than any fiction could conjure. The Raptors edged closer, close enough for Sarah to see the reflective visors of the pilots inside. Their wings tilted in a silent command. Identify yourself. Respond now. Sarah's radio crackled with static, but no direct communication came through. Protocol dictated silence until positive identification was made. It was as if the jets were circling predators, waiting to decide whether their prey lived or died. Mason's hands trembled slightly on his lap. Captain, if they don't recognize us. Sarah cut him off. Then we make them recognize us. The Raptors shifted again, one swooping lower in an unmistakable warning maneuver. Falcon's tower would already be debating contingencies. Was this a hijacked jet? A rogue pilot? A potential weapon aimed at their own base? The wrong answer, Sarah knew, could end in disaster, not only for her passengers but for the men flying beside her. Her mind raced back to her own days in the Air Force Reserve, when she had trained in combat scenarios not unlike this one. She remembered instructors barking commands, the importance of call signs, the unspoken bond between aviators. That bond might be her only chance now. Prepare the emergency frequency, she told Mason. He blinked at her. That's restricted. So is being in their airspace, Sarah snapped gently, though her tone carried no malice, only urgency. Do it. The Raptors tightened their formation, signaling again. Passengers began to panic once more, whispers growing louder, fear spreading like wildfire. Sarah gripped the radio, her mind made up. She wasn't going to let her story end as a threat. Falcon Base, she murmured under her breath, almost as if speaking to the sky itself. It's me, just hear me out. She adjusted the frequency, her finger hovering over the transmit button. For a moment, the cockpit filled with nothing but the hum of the engines and the quiet throb of alarms. Then Sarah pressed the button, about to reveal the one piece of herself she had kept hidden all these years, her call sign. The Raptors waited, their wings steady, their weapons primed. This was the knife's edge. The line between salvation and destruction was thinner than a whisper. And Sarah was about to step across it. Sarah's finger hovered over the transmit button, her pulse hammering in her ears. This wasn't just breaking rules. This was smashing through every layer of military protocol she had once sworn to protect. But she had no choice. Passengers were watching her. Mason was waiting for her lead, and two Raptors outside were seconds from deciding whether her plane lived or died. She inhaled slowly, steadying her nerves. One call sign could change everything. The radio crackled, faint static filling the cockpit. Sarah pressed the button. Her voice came firm, commanding, but carrying something more: familiarity. Falcon Control, this is Eagle One. Repeat, Eagle One on civilian transport, requesting acknowledgement. For a split second, silence reigned. Mason's eyes went wide. Passengers didn't know what had just happened, but the shift in Sarah's voice carried weight, enough to quiet the whispers in the cabin. Outside, the Raptors hesitated. Their wings leveled, their formation breaking the rigid stance they had held moments earlier. One tilted, almost uncertain. Then the radio erupted. "Say again," a stunned male voice crackled through. Sarah repeated, louder this time, each syllable sharp. "Falcon Control, this is Eagle One, former reserve. I am commanding this aircraft. Situation under control. Do not engage." Another pause, longer this time, tense as stretched wire. Then came the voice again, lower, hushed, almost disbelieving. "Eagle One, Captain Sarah." Mason's head whipped toward her, jaw slack. He whispered, "You." Sarah kept her eyes locked on the horizon. "Affirmative, Eagle One, redirecting this aircraft per emergency." The Raptors drew closer, but their movements had softened. No longer hunters circling prey, now protectors leaning in. One rolled a wingtip in recognition, a gesture that needed no words. In Falcon's tower, chaos buzzed. Younger officers exchanged frantic looks, flipping through old logs. One pulled up dusty archives. There it was. Eagle One, Sarah, decorated pilot, honorably discharged but never forgotten. "Sir," an operator said to his commander, "it's her. No doubt about it." The commander leaned over the console, his brow furrowed. "Get me on the line, now." Back in the cockpit, Mason still hadn't closed his mouth. "You were Air Force and Eagle One. Why didn't you ever?" "Later," Sarah cut him off softly. "Right now we keep them with us." The radio flared again, this time with authority. "Eagle One, Falcon Control. Confirm situation. Are you compromised?" Sarah pressed down, her voice unwavering. "Negative, Falcon. Situation stable. Mechanical failure, forced deviation. Civilians secure. I repeat, do not engage." The pause that followed was different, not one of doubt, but of recognition. The kind of pause soldiers gave when an old commander walked into the room. Finally, the reply came. "Copy that, Eagle One. Raptors remain in escort formation until further instruction. Welcome home." The words hit Sarah harder than she expected. Welcome home. She hadn't heard that in years. A lump formed in her throat, but she pushed it down. Now wasn't the time. The Raptors shifted again, this time gracefully, slipping into protective positions along the jet wings. To passengers, the change was clear. The hunters had become guardians. Gasps of fear turned into murmurs of relief. Some even clapped nervously, sensing they had just avoided catastrophe without knowing exactly how. Mason leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. "You just made two of the deadliest aircraft in the world stand down with 2 words. Who are you, Captain?" Sarah allowed the faintest smile, her gaze never leaving the sky ahead. Someone who never thought she'd have to be Eagle One again. Inside Falcon's control tower, the commander issued swift orders. "Maintain contact. Escort her through, and keep this off the books until I say otherwise." He turned to his officers. "If she's back in the air, something bigger is coming." For Sarah, however, the fight wasn't over. They were safe for now, but Falcon wouldn't let this pass without questions. And somewhere deep down, she knew this incident was only the spark of something far greater. The cabin quieted, passengers whispering their gratitude, still unaware of the storm their captain had just navigated them through. But Sarah knew better. This was no resolution. This was the beginning of a reckoning. Because once you break protocol, you can't go back. The jet leveled into smoother skis, its wounded engine straining but holding. The Raptors held their protective formation, wings glinting in the sun like silver shields. For the first time in hours, the passengers dared to breathe easier. Some whispered prayers of thanks, others quietly sobbed into their hands, relief and exhaustion mingling together. But in the cockpit, Sarah knew calm was only an illusion. The radio crackled again. "Eagle 1, Falcon Command. You are ordered to divert to Falcon Base immediately. Repeat, immediate landing authorization granted. Do you copy?" Mason stiffened. "They're pulling us in, Sarah, if we land at Falcon." "They'll take the plane and the passengers." She finished the thought for him. Falcon Base wasn't a civilian airfield. Landing there meant surrendering control, turning over everyone on board to military custody until the situation was unraveled. Sarah knew the consequences. Passengers would be interrogated, flights delayed, families torn apart in bureaucratic confusion. Some might never understand why they were suddenly caught in military gears. And worse, Sarah's own cover would be blown wide open. Her past as Eagle 1 would become more than a call sign whispered through static. It would be a headline. The radio crackled again, more forceful this time. "Eagle 1, confirm course diversion. This is a direct order." Sarah's grip tightened on the yoke. Her training screamed at her to obey. The chain of command had been the foundation of her life in uniform. Disobeying wasn't just defiance, it was betrayal. But her eyes flicked to the cabin behind her. Children slept in their mother's arms, exhausted from fear. An elderly man clutched a photograph, rocking silently. Families held hands, silently begging for peace. They weren't soldiers. They hadn't signed up for chains of command or classified interrogations. They trusted her, their captain, to get them home. Mason broke the silence, his voice low. "What are you going to do?" Sarah exhaled slowly, every breath weighted with years of discipline and loyalty. "What I swore I'd always do, protect them." She pressed the transmit button, her voice steady, calm but unshakably firm. "Falcon Command, this is Eagle 1. Negative on diversion. I repeat, negative. We're continuing course to civilian destination." The reply was instantaneous and sharp. "Eagle 1, that's an unlawful refusal of command. Confirm diversion or Raptors will escort you down by force." Passengers gasped as the Raptors tightened formation, one edging forward, its nose angled slightly toward the jet as if nudging it off course. Through the windows, the sleek fighter seemed menacing again, its intentions unclear. Mason's breath caught. "They'll do it, Sarah. They'll force us down." Sarah's jaw clenched. "Not if I remind them who I am." She flipped to a secure frequency, one only known to those who had once sat in Raptor cockpits. Her hand trembled for the briefest second before she spoke, her voice cutting through the static like a blade. "Raptors in formation, this is Eagle 1. You don't point your nose at me unless you're ready to pull the trigger. And if you do, you'd better remember whose wing you used to fly under." For a breathless moment, silence. Then one of the Raptors peeled slightly away, a signal of acknowledgement, of respect. The other followed, shifting back into pure escort, their threat dissipating. Inside Falcon Command, voices erupted in chaos. "She's overruling us," one officer barked. The commander raised a hand, silencing the room. He stared at the radar screen, watching the old call sign defy his orders with the same iron will she had shown years ago. his lips pressed into a thin line. "Let her go." "Sir," an aide stammered. "She made her call," the commander said quietly, "and she's earned it." Back in the cockpit, Mason stared at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. "You just the United States Air Force, and they let you." Sarah didn't smile. Her eyes remained locked on the horizon, her voice quiet but resolute. "I didn't defy them. I reminded them who I am." Behind her, the passengers remained unaware of the razor-thin margin on which their lives had balanced. To them, they were simply being escorted by protective jets. But for Sarah, it was the hardest command decision of her life, one she could never undo. And though the plane pressed on toward its destination, Sarah knew the storm wasn't over. She had saved them once again, but in doing so, she had woken ghosts the world thought long buried. The civilian jet descended steadily, engines groaning but holding together under Sarah's steady hand. The Raptors maintained their escort, no longer predators circling prey, but guardians ensuring safe passage. Below, the city lights stretched like veins of gold across the dark earth, a reminder of the ordinary world waiting for them. As the landing gear deployed, a collective breath swept through the cabin. Mothers clutched their children, weary businessmen loosened their ties, and strangers reached across aisles to squeeze hands. They didn't know the details of what had just happened, only that their captain had carried them through a gauntlet of fear. When the wheels screeched against the runway and the jet slowed to a shuddering crawl, the cabin erupted in applause. Some passengers wept openly, others shouted praise, their relief spilling out in raw emotion. Sarah allowed herself a small smile, but her heart remained heavy. For her, the landing was not the end. It was only the beginning. The Raptors broke formation at the edge of the airport, banking gracefully back toward Falcon Base. The message was clear. Their job was done, but the eyes of the military would never truly leave her again. As ground crews swarmed the plane and emergency vehicles lined the tarmac, Mason turned to her, his voice low but filled with awe. "You didn't just land a crippled plane. You stared down Falcon Command, and you won." Sarah shook her head gently. "No one wins against Falcon, Mason, not forever." The cockpit door opened, and a wave of sound from the passengers poured in: cheers, gratitude, frantic stories already being rehearsed for families waiting beyond the gates. A little girl darted forward, her cheeks streaked with tears, holding up a stuffed bear. "Thank you, Captain," she whispered, her voice trembling. Sarah knelt, taking the bear for a brief moment before handing it back with a smile. "You were brave up there, braver than you know." It was the kind of moment that grounded her, the reminder of why she had chosen to fly again, after years away from cockpits and call signs. She wasn't here to serve a command anymore. She was here to serve people. But the outside world was already buzzing. Reporters clamored behind barriers, cameras flashing, headlines spinning faster than she could imagine. Mysterious pilot saves doomed flight. F-22s escort civilian jet after crisis. Who is Captain Sarah? Before Sarah could step off the plane, a familiar voice crackled through her private headset one last time. "Eagle One, this is Falcon Command. You broke silence today. You broke protocol, and you reminded us why your name still carries weight. We'll be in touch." The line went dead. Sarah removed the headset, staring at it in her hands. It felt heavier than it had hours ago, as though it carried the weight of two lives, the one she lived now, and the one she thought she had left behind. Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. "You could walk away, you know. Pretend this was just one extraordinary day." Sarah met his eyes, a flicker of weariness mixing with resolve. "I could, but after today the skis won't let me." Outside, the passengers filed into the terminal, their faces etched with gratitude and awe. Some would carry this story forever, telling it at dinner tables and family gatherings. The day their captain the odds and the military to save them. For Sarah, though, it was not a story of defiance. It was a story of responsibility, of promises made long ago that had finally been called due. As she stepped down from the aircraft, her boots meeting solid ground, the night air wrapped around her like an old friend. She looked once toward the horizon, where the Raptors had disappeared, then back to her passengers being reunited with loved ones. She knew Falcon Base would come knocking. She knew her name, her call sign, would echo in circles she had hoped to leave behind. But she also knew this: when the sky calls, some people can never turn away. And Sarah, Eagle One, had just answered that call again. The world might see her as a hero. The Air Force might see her as a problem. But for the passengers who walked off her flight alive, she was something simpler, something far greater. She was their captain,